Interestingly, the best scene in Rocky, they didn't like it, and he wrote it obviously, and they didn't want them to use it, and they only gave him one take to get it right because he said it's going to work.
Right.
It was the night before the Apollo Creed fight,
Right.
and he wakes up in bed and he says, "I can't win."
Yeah.
And Adrian says, "What are we going to do?"
Yeah.
Get goosebumps. What are we going to do?
Goosebumps.
Rocky 1 is a masterpiece.
Oh, it's unbelievable. Yeah, I love Rocky.
Rocky 3 is my favourite.
I mean, they're all very good.
Yeah.
Up
No, but
until
Rocky
4.
1 is cinema, though, you know what I mean?
So 4? He's... Whoa.
Sorry, and including.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, Jesus.
I love Rocky Balboa as well. I think it's underrated.
Very
Yeah.
good.
It's
Because
not
they
bad.
tried to just copy the same format as 1, obviously.
I love the Creed movies as well.
Yeah.
I've only watched the first.
The first one's excellent.
Yeah.
Second one's missable. Third one is good, even though
Is it good? Yeah.
Jonathan Majors is in the third one, so there's a bit of he's cancelled now.
We're under time pressure. Is he? What's he? We're still under time pressure.
Ballon d'Or, Ballon d'Or, Ballon d'Or, Ballon d'Or, Ballon d'Or, Ballon d'Or. Vinicius has just taken the Ballon d'Or. Is that the Ballon d'Or in the bag now? Has he gone ahead now for the Ballon d'Or? Wow.
No, he hasn't. Despite Rio's rubber stamping Vinny Jr. And his credentials, Rodri has been named your Ballon d'Or winner 2024, and this has prompted one of the great strops. Even by Real Madrid standards, this is one of the great strops. Miguel Delaney is with us in due course on all of that and the various machinations around Old Trafford. Ruth Fahy also on the way today. The Republic of Ireland women's team are through to a Euro 2025 playoff against Wales next month. It will be a two-legged affair, Cardiff first, and then the Aviva Stadium on December 3rd is going to be an occasion. Big stakes. And it's very simple. Winner takes all. The loser has an empty summer. This after Ireland did the necessary against Georgia, including last night 3-0 in Tala, 9-0 on aggregate. Indo Sport team have assembled. It's been a while, fellas. Ronan Mullen, hello to you.
Hi, Joe.
And Conan Doherty, good afternoon.
Hello, Joe.
So we haven't had a chance this week, Bank Holiday Monday. Some of us answered the call on Monday. Others decidedly absent. We won't point fingers.
Was there a message in the WhatsApp group?
No, it was like
Must have missed
it was a bat symbol over, and Joe just answered the call.
I started running. And so yesterday then was obviously panel and
Rugby.
oh Jesus,
Oh,
rugby.
wow.
Yes.
It's only one of the several managerial departures of the week.
Yesterday was rugby, an impromptu. See, I'm a little all over the shop because also then yesterday had meant to be our panel and then a leisurely lunch and then Paul McGinley interview recorded last night, and of course Graham Rowntree and Munster had other ideas, so it was all very busy. Paul McGinley is going out today. It's in your feed now, I would think, along with this football show. And it's a really great chat, actually. Even if you're not necessarily mad about your golf, there are aspects to it which are, I was going to say interesting is the wrong word, or affecting perhaps, but Paul talks with great candour and warmth about his mother who passed away last year, and his father now who is 85 and has dementia, and Paul is very much, along with his siblings, caring for his father, and they're intent on keeping him in the family home. And so that is waiting for you and well worth the listen. And of course then there's all the golfy stuff as well. The state of the game, the fortunes of McIlroy, and Paul making it big on US TV. Actually, him and Brandel Chambly do an exceptionally popular US golf TV show around the big tournaments. So that's all waiting for you. Today, though, it's football. The story here is that Real Madrid, we'll get to this with Miguel Delaney in a few moments' time after we speak to Ruth Fahy, but Real Madrid, if you are unsure of what just happened here exactly, who are now, by the way, saying the Ballon d'Or is irrelevant, they had nonetheless organised for 50 people to travel to said irrelevance in Paris. And then on foot of word that Vinicius Jr. was not going to win the Ballon d'Or, the travelling party in its entirety was cancelled. It was a complete boycott. And so it meant that of the 6 men's awards, they won 3, by the way. I mean, what a snubbing of Real Madrid. They won 3. But it meant that Carlo Ancelotti was not there to pick up Coach of the Year. It meant that Kylian Mbappe was not there to accept the Gerd Muller Award with Harry Kane. So Kane got to have the stage to himself, I suppose. And nobody was there to accept team of the year as well. You don't want to get too upset about all this, but it's actually dreadful behaviour. They're a disgrace, really, Real Madrid, in so many ways. It's shocking. And I even thought it was, again, he may not overly care, but Rodri is having one of the great moments of his life, and he's talking about what a special day it is for him and his family. And the whole thing has been turned into a circus. And the headlines are not about Rodri, they're about Real Madrid. It's so classless, the behaviour of Madrid in this instance. And it's not like peak Messi has been denied here. There's a very, 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 and I'll get into it, Miguel, very credible argument that Rodri is the deserving winner.
Yeah, and maybe it's a secondary argument, but or secondary element even. It's a Spaniard that won it, and arguably one of Spain's preeminent teams just decided to boycott a Spaniard winning it, fresh from the Spanish national team winning the Euros. It's somewhat pointed, I would say.
Yeah, and you're saying Rodri is a somewhat deserving winner. I mean, definitely over Vinicius Jr. It's not, like you say, it's not Lionel Messi scoring 91 goals in a calendar year. I mean, that's such a fine argument to have. Who had a better season, Rodri or the 8th top scorer in La Liga? Vinicius Jr. didn't even win Player of the Season in La Liga. He only won one Player of the Month award all that campaign. They got to the quarterfinals of the Copa America. Vinicius Jr. didn't even play. He got 2 yellow cards in the group stage. A group stage where they drew 2 of the 3 matches. Like, he wasn't lighting it up for Brazil either. Vinicius Jr., by the way, is a brilliant player, but this is not the snubbing of the decade. This is not, don't send your club there. I was going to say, don't send your club there to win the Team of the Year award. They already won that when they won the Champions League. They don't need to go get a Team or a Club of the Year, but it's strange. Carry on.
They've behaved as if it's a scandal.
Yeah.
Which I agree, I don't think it is. So, all very childish and silly on Madrid's part. Meanwhile, and we'll get Miguel's take on all this, the insider trading, but the latest on Ruben Amorim is that negotiations are being held up a touch because he has a 30-day notice period built into his contract. Why would you have that in a football contract? When you think, no, you have to stay, but you'll do your best for the next 30 days, won't you? I will, yeah. I mean, it's, somehow I think that 30-day notice period, that's the kind of problem that can be solved with money.
Yeah, another 0.
Just throw one more in there. So I'm sure they'll get it sorted. It is kind of strange, like he was managing them last night. So it's, I guess it's all a bit full on. They have Chelsea on Sunday, Manchester United. I mean, were it to drag on beyond that, it would get a bit silly, but I'm sure they'll sort that out. So, without wanting to give the hierarchy there premature credit, assuming that they can turn around Ruben Amorim within, say, a week of the sacking of Ten Hag, that's a reasonably impressive and surgical intervention on their part. Yes, they fudged the decision in the summer, and I accept that. But I can understand what, like, it was fudgeable when they had just won the FA Cup, and it was difficult to just say, now you're sacked. So they fudged it, I agree, and they wasted money in doing so. But now that they've decided intervention was needed, if they have managed to sack Ten Hag and catch everybody by surprise, and also on the side be in contact with Amorim and keep that quiet and bag him, the promising young manager of the day, that, you kind of have to give Team Ineos a degree of credit, and that's business reasonably well done, or no?
There is something that seems to be part of the Ineos narrative at the minute. I remember when Ugart, I think it was signed, and Ashworth showed up, and it was almost like it was keen for everyone, all the United fans watching on, for them to hear this. He said, obviously we've been tracking you for a long time, and this is the narrative now. They've been speaking to Amorim for a long time. But like, I would buy that it's fudgeable if we weren't told by Gary Neville for the last 3 months that there was nobody out there, that they spoke to the candidates, there was nobody good enough to take Ten Hag's place, so they stuck with him. That's the reason they stuck with him, not even the FA Cup, that they'd done their due diligence. Amorim was interviewing for the West Ham job in the summer. Like, this guy was available. He's in the exact same position now as he was in the summer, so it looks like it's going to be a good appointment, unfortunately, for people who love the Man United car crash and the soapbox that it is, but so maybe on some level they do deserve credit. Maybe there was a bit of, look, he's won the FA Cup, let's just see, we'll give him a few more of his players. It's only 160 million, we can part with that.
And the likes of Ashworth and Wilcox were only just in the door. It's difficult. Now, it was the wrong thing to do, obviously, to not sack Ten Hag at the end of last season.
Yeah.
But I think to be fair and human about it, it's understandable.
Yeah, and to your point, like the only worse decision than this would be to continue going. It's like, we've made a wrong decision. Let's just keep making the wrong decision. Sometimes it is admirable when you make a wrong decision.
Yeah.
To admit you've made the wrong decision, let's just scrap it and go again.
Ronan Mullen chortled, spluttered when he saw the payout for Ten Hag. What did you say it was?
It was £15 million or something.
15 million.
Wow.
Considering they renewed his contract on the existing terms, and he was like, his contract was due to expire at the end of the year, and they didn't want to undermine him by just having him on this rolling contract. But they undermined him by interviewing 7 or 8 candidates in the summer. That horse had already bolted, there's loads to this, isn't there? Like, I don't know. I totally take the point, and I would agree with you. Give them a mulligan on that summer decision, because it was a tough one, and Omar Barada was just in the door in the summer, like a matter of days before the FA Cup final. So, I this is really where you begin to judge them, I would say. I just wonder, have they been Man City'd again here with the whole, he's been lined up by them to replace Pep, in the same way they really wanted Harry Maguire and they really wanted Alexis Sanchez. I hope that Omar Barada has some insider knowledge there where they haven't been duped here, because Amorim's been, as Colin alluded to, he was linked with the Liverpool job, he's been linked with the Bayern job. All these top clubs have taken a look at him and decided to go elsewhere for whatever reason. There's some insinuation that he's extremely wedded to his 3-4-3 setup, and Liverpool, for one, balked at that a little bit because they didn't want to, once Klopp was stepping away, they didn't want to just dispel all the good work that he had done with a brand new approach. So United aren't in that position. They probably need a new approach and some shock therapy. So I think any appointment is good, and I think Ruud van Nistelrooy is probably the one thinking, jeez, why can I not have been in the Solskjaer position where they're giving me a free run at this, because they've got a very winnable few fixtures, excluding Chelsea, and he could easily build up a resume where they're like, give it to him till the end of the season. Doesn't look like that's going to happen.
Okay, Miguel on the way, Ruth Fahy next. Well then, for the Republic of Ireland, hopefully next summer at the Euros beckons. They dispatched of Georgia in Tala last night. It was a 3-0 win. 9-0 on aggregate after Tbilisi on Friday night. So it's going to be Wales or Ireland. It's that simple. There is a Euros showdown at the end of November, start of December. Second leg is at the Aviva Stadium. Here is just a taste of what Eileen Gleeson had to say post-match last night.
Job done, Tony. No yellow cards here tonight, which is a big goal. So, good condition going into the next phase. Super happy. I think over the 2 legs. Good job. We knew it'd be difficult. These low blocks, a little bit of chaos tonight. Bit of, things, the performance we can definitely work on. But job done tonight. 0 yellows. Happy enough.
Are you disappointed that there weren't more goals for this record Tala crowd?
Yes, very disappointed. I thought, it was super crowded out there. At times we were crowding our own spaces out. So, we tried to adjust that at half time. And we would have liked more goals. Julie would tell you she should have finished that one there. Rock gave a shot but wide, and of course 9 times out of 10 Katie finished the penalties, but this is just on the night. But listen, job done, clean sheet, no yellows, we go forward.
So the next question is the final, home and away. What are you hoping for in the next month, 4 weeks or so from your players?
Oh well, we just spoke about that in the huddle. It's like now you have to take care of your recovery, your minutes, your performances. You have to come back fit as you can be, ready to go, fire in your belly, and you have to take care of yourself. And these next is a quick turnaround, so we all have to be pretty sharp now.
Eileen Gleeson speaking to Tony O'Donoghue on RT's match coverage last night. Very happy to say Ruth Fahy is with us. She is currently Vice President of Club Administration and Compliance with the Colorado Rapids in the MLS. She, of course, played with Galway and Wexford, where she was a league winner. And we're happy to say you're joining us stateside. Good afternoon from us. Good morning to you.
Good morning, Joe. Great to see you again. I'm on the strong caffeine here, but happy to be here.
So here we go. Ireland against Wales on the horizon. They took care of Georgia. Any big takeaways from the game last night, or the 2 games where, frankly, Ireland were always going to win and were always in complete control?
Thought the performance yesterday was much better than the first leg, despite the fact there are less goals. You can ask, when you're playing opposition like Georgia, is there a lot that you can take away from these games? And there obviously is. First of all, tidy and professional across the board. Couple of standout performances, I think. In particular, player of the match last night, no surprise, Julianne Russell, who I've known for a long time. We can come back to again. Thought having that back three, Anna Patton, Aoife Mannion and Caitlin Hayes played together like that is interesting to watch, and that can only be positive for Eileen and that back three. Anna Patton in particular, I think, is going to get better and better in that defensive position. And Jessie Stapleton, really impressive. Forget that she's so young. Really impressive the way she can just transition between. She was playing in the back three, back four at one point, and then as a holding six. Thought she was excellent. And then I have to give a shout out to Marissa Shiva, who had a difficult time in Australia at the World Cup and kind of dipped out of the squad for a little bit. She's come back in, and credit to Eileen for giving her vote of confidence and playing her in that central position. I thought she was not only really busy last night, but really tidy on the ball. And I'll be honest, I was a little bit surprised at that. I didn't expect that from her. And I thought, Eileen and the management team can take a lot from that. Coming back to player of the match, Julianne, I know we've probably yourself and others have talked a lot about her and her story in recent times. And she blows me away. I was reading an article this morning about how she's got to kind of fit to her own training plan over the coming month to be prepared for Wales, and it will be no issue for Julie. She's just got this incredible mentality I've never experienced ever before in my life in a player. I've known Julie since she was about 10 years old, and just watching her do her thing the last couple of games has just been so enjoyable. But it's all about the end of November, and it's a huge clash against Wales, and it's going to be two very equal sides, and I can't wait for it.
Yeah, it's going to be amazing, really. Given the stakes and the tension, and I'm anticipating a big crowd at the Aviva, presumably. So, there's a whole bunch in what you listed off there. For instance, even Anna Patton, last night was short on goals. Eileen Gleeson expressed her disappointment in that department as well. But the second goal, there was a craft to it that we don't often see from this Irish side. They can score goals and set pieces are strong and different areas are strong and certain players are to the fore. But that kind of move is not something we see very often. And Anna Patton's part in it, she the craft aspect is she opens out her body as if that pass is going out to her right, and then she fizzes it, whips it in straight ahead of her. It's a disguised kind of a pass, and then obviously the flick for Stapleton and Carusa finishes. I kind of think that's about the best goal they've scored in the last couple of years that I've seen.
Actually, I completely agree. It was so nice to watch, and as you say, every single part of that goal. And if you watch Anna Patton through the game last night, she was playing those balls consistently through the 90 minutes. Like you say, to have a centre half who can do that. Not only to have a centre half who can do that, but to have Jessie Stapleton with a little flick, and she fired that ball into a little flick, and Ciara Carusa, who's just keeping on proving herself, has been such an integral part of this squad. She anticipated that, and the finish was beautiful, and I couldn't agree more. That's one of the nicest goals I've seen from this team in a long, long time, and it's a credit to them. Yes,
and I see, a forward player, if you're stable in there, you want a bit of pace on the ball. You want to be fizz it into me and I can do something with it. Don't be overly gentle with the pass and kind of bobbling it on in, a bit of trust that my touch will be up to it, whatever I decide to do.
Yeah, exactly. But it's the anticipation from all the players, Stapleton in particular. She knew exactly where Ciara was. And sometimes little flicks like that we've seen in the past don't always come off, but it was perfect into the channel. Ciara Carusa, one touch and finish. So hopefully more of that to come against Wales. You
mentioned that you quite like the formation and the shape, and obviously an aspect of that was that Katie McCabe was playing quite centrally. Is that something that you suspect we're going to see against Wales, or where do you think Eileen Gleeson is with her best 11?
Well, I think Katie is able to play centrally now because we have the weapon of Julianne Russell, who can play either on the left, the right, or up top. Julie would have played predominantly on the left wing through most of her international career, if I'm right. So having that energy on the left side means that it's a little bit more protected, and I think that's what we saw last night. And actually, when Julianne was pulled centrally, we probably lost a bit of the attacking force at times. So I think we will see a bit of that. But like I mentioned already, Marissa Shiva as well, just having a bit more confidence in those areas, that just helps the team massively. And we didn't have Tyler Tolan on the field last night. Megan Connolly, there's actual depth in the squad now, Joe, and that's not said lightly. There's depth with players. There's quality all across the bench. There's players who didn't make the squad who were probably very tight. And like talking again about the back three, Louise Quinn, Ruth Fahy, if these players, Dion Caldwell, if these players are back fit, that's a huge headache for Eileen, and that's exactly what she wants. But she's got real difficult questions now about who to start up against Wales, the first away game in Cardiff at the end of next month. And that's honestly, Joe, I think like Eileen has done an incredible job since she's come in. I think she came in at a very difficult time. I think she's done exactly everything that she can. And talking about Julianne as well, like obviously as a player, she should get all the credit, but if her and Eileen didn't have that kind of pre-existing relationship from back in the League of Ireland days, from Eileen knowing her value from her previous like international experience, you know, another manager may not have called her back in, and we can't underestimate the impact that Julianne has had. She scored that goal against England. She was pivotal against France, and now she's coming in starting, and her ability to go and actually place that energy on the left side, giving our best player, Katie McCabe, the freedom to move centrally. This is huge for us, and this is going to be massive again against Wales. Yeah,
she's done amazingly well, and you said you know her since she was 10, but I think it jumps through to everybody who's just watching from afar through television that she's the type of personality you want around a squad as well, and there's just quality there as well. I mean, her goals against France, that imbues everybody with a sense of possibility and belief that, okay, like, we'll dig in here in games where we're struggling because actually we have someone up there who might nick us a goal now. Like, that's important in football. And do you prefer Katie centrally, like to borrow the men's parallel at the moment? People are looking at Sammy Smodix and they want him centrally because he's not as good on the left. Like, you put Katie on the left, she's just fine there too. So I guess it's where is she best, I wonder?
It just depends, Joe. Like, it just depends who you're playing against. It depends the shape that you're playing against. It depends who you have around you. I think if you have Julianne on the left, then I would like to see Katie centrally, just because of the damage she can inflict, the way she can link up with Denise O'Sullivan. Like, they know each other inside out at this stage. And then when you have Kira Carusa, who is still growing back into fitness, like, that's a very dangerous trio. Abby Larkin was exceptional in the first leg as well. So these are all players that can inflict damage on teams, you know, and if they come in fit, sharp, and hopefully with confidence that they should have at this point, I'm optimistic for a chance in the playoff. Okay,
well, and to expand on the job Gleeson has done for a moment, so like the short version is she got the job on the back of beating Minnows very easily, and that, you know, so that left people a little bit unsure as to her merits, is the brutal truth. I mean, you know, Ireland were going to beat those teams regardless. They beat them well, but she got the job nonetheless. And then she got landed with that incredibly difficult group stage. And it's, you know, I mean, away to England and best of luck in England at home and Sweden and France. And to be fair, they did okay. You know, not least the last two games, the away performance in England and the win against France at Porky Queeve. And now we're here where they play Wales. So beyond the way she's managed the likes of Russell, in terms of the performances, what is it you like about what Eileen Gleeson has done here? Or why do you say she's done a good job?
Yeah, and just to first start with the point about how, like, she's kind of come in and she's looked at this tenure in two phases. So she's had the first phase where, as you mentioned, it was League B, so Hungary, Albania, Northern Ireland. It was pretty easy, 6 wins out of 6.
Yeah.
Then they faced Wales, if you remember, back in February.
Yes, I'm going to come to that because that worried me at the time. It worries me a lot more now.
It worried us all the time. But let me finish this one before you get too worried, because it was a pretty flat performance. They did get bullied off the pitch and lost 2-0 at home in February. And then Eileen kind of entered phase 2 of the tenure and obviously had to play England, Sweden and France twice, but managed to kind of end, obviously, that difficult phase on a positive note with the goal against England and that massive win against France. If you look at Wales, they've actually kind of had the inverse experience. So they were in League A in the Women's Nation League back in that September to December period last year. They played Iceland, Denmark, Germany, lost all their games apart from a draw with Germany. So a little similar enough against bigger opposition. We probably got the edge on them there. Then they played us. They came in having played like that higher opposition, and they did play us off the park. Since their most recent games then against Croatia, Kosovo and Ukraine, drew Ukraine twice and hammered the rest. So like we've had a very similar last 12 months, but kind of the inverse experience. So, but I think coming into this, like if you asked Eileen what she would have wanted, she would have preferred the way that our last year has kind of been designed, because we're going to come into this game massively confident, knowing that we can score against England, knowing that we can score against France. And I think that'll be huge for us. But to go back to your question, in general, how has she done? Like, I think seeing Eileen get the job, as someone who personally myself is very, very passionate about League of Ireland, very passionate about developing domestic players, very passionate about linking our league with the national team. Like, you're really excited to see someone like Eileen come in. I think she's done amazingly well. Like, she's kind of set a pathway now for other coaches that you can come up through the League of Ireland or the Women's National League. I know she had a period abroad in Scotland, and which is really, really important. I think going abroad and getting the experience can come back and help you back in Ireland. And she's come back in, and she's obviously got the respect of the players, which is massive. She has, again, I'm going to reference bringing in Julianne again, because it's been so important in this campaign.
Yeah.
Obviously, people in Ireland want to see her kind of blooding more players, but like at this stage in the campaign, she needs to win and put in performances. And the way she's even kind of, we've got, I'll reference a back three again, Anna Patton, Caitlin Hayes, and Aoife Mannion. There's something quite special there. I think she's done exceptionally well.
Yeah.
You know, under a lot of pressure.
They're proper
pressure.
Yeah, they're proper footballers, those three.
Yeah, absolutely, and all across the park now. But I think, you know, when you hear people talking about Eileen, you talk about how good she is and kind of the backroom staff management, and that's something I've learned after coming over to the States, like how important that is. How to picking the right people and the right blend of personalities in your staff is absolutely everything. If you don't get that right, that's something that can damage your on-field performance, but nobody ever talks about it because nobody sees it, right? And none of the players are going to talk about it, or the staff are going to talk about it. But she's obviously gotten that piece right. She's obviously able to motivate her staff and players. Like, you have to give her credit for what she's done the last 12 months. I think it's definitely to be admired. Yeah,
fair point. So the way you lay out the cadence of Ireland's year versus Wales' year does sound encouraging. All that said, this feels on a knife edge, really. I mean, very similar profile, pressure over two legs. I mean, do you feel very confident? Because
You don't sound too confident, Joe. How are you?
I feel it's somewhere like 55-45 in Ireland's favour, and I do feel a lot better post the performance away in England and the win against France, just for confidence and just like, okay, we're kind of stabilising the ship here. Because Wales against Ireland, I mean, they owned the ball. We couldn't get near them. Physically, they look better than us, you know. And I take your point. They'd been playing at a higher standard. Ireland maybe didn't benefit from playing the minnows. So I guess you swirl it all around in the pot, and maybe there's a degree of bias. I kind of feel 55-45 in Ireland's favour. I think it's very helpful the Aviva leg second, you know, so Ireland will know what they have to do that night. Yeah. But I wouldn't have it any more than 55-45. By all means, convince me that we're a home run.
No, 55-45. I'll take at this point. I go 60-40. If I'm being honest, like I just don't want to give too much weight to that loss back in February. Like I said, you're coming off the back of playing a certain system. When you're playing the Hungaries, Albanias, Northern Ireland, you're playing a certain way, and then you kind of meet someone. I couldn't pick another country who are nearly so exactly similar to Ireland in terms of player profiles. I think Eileen mentioned, like, they play with emotion as well. They play with quite a lot of passion, and they're a very passionate squad. Yeah. And they've got one or two standout players, like Jess Fishlock being probably the most important player in their team. I don't know if you got to see any highlights of the game last night. Like, there was a crazy game last night against Slovakia. They had to win. They had 2 disallowed goals, and then their winning goal was actually initially disallowed before being overturned by VAR and by VAR. And yeah, you can see what it meant to these players, because let's keep in mind, there's another edge to this game. Like, Wales have never qualified for a major tournament. So Ireland just got there ahead of them by qualifying for the World Cup in Australia. I don't think this is going to be a game for the technical or tactical lovers. Like, I think these are going to be fiery games. It's going to be a lot of passion, and I'm still keeping to 60-40, just because we're coming into this with confidence. Players are playing with confidence. Like, Eileen has been with the squad now for a good period of time. And like I said, just keeping Julianne fit and maintaining that level of performance is going to help everybody around here. And I'm sticking to 60-40, even if you're going to be 55.
No, sold. I'll meet you at, I'll take 58.
Go on.
Thank you so much. Great to have you on. Before you go, by the way, there was an interesting exchange of views between Kieran Kilduff, the Athlone town manager, and Eileen Gleeson. I'm sure you saw them. In effect, Kieran Kilduff was bemoaning the lack of pathway. I mean, you talked about the pathway that Gleeson offers to other managers domestically, but the lack of pathways, singular or plural, for League of Ireland players into the national side. And he talked about the training camps for domestic players going by the wayside. And Gleeson really took exception to it. You know, there was, I suspect what was going on was she was saying, how dare anyone question my dedication to the league? I'm immersed in this my entire life. But she said, you know, my phone's on. I'm watching the players. I'm seeing the players. I'm aware of the players. If Kieran wants to talk, he can pick up the phone. So it was quite a pointed exchange. And maybe we should have a deeper, longer conversation. But I'm just curious for your general thoughts on the Kilduff, Gleeson, not to call it a war of words, but the Duff and Gleeson exchange.
I tend not to talk about the League of Ireland anymore. I had to give up for a while. I was just becoming too negative, Joe, if I'm being honest.
Okay.
And you know what, I don't know Kieran Kilduff, but I've heard phenomenal things about him. I know Eileen a little bit, and I like I've mentioned before, I admire everything she's done in the game. So I can see the comments on both sides. Kieran is doing exactly what a manager should do, and he's advocating for his players, who he strongly believes deserves more recognition, and I absolutely support that. I personally enjoy seeing like anything ideally is positive or it creates debate in the media on the Women's League of Ireland, because it obviously never does kind of get enough attention. I know Kieran has a very strong background in the men's League of Ireland, and I've kind of seen that before, where maybe former players on the men's side or former coaches come over onto the women's side and maybe receive more awareness about how much kind of contact hours and how much dedication and how much time these Women's League of Ireland players put in. And it's, you know, as a manager, you care about your players. And if you care about your players, you're going to advocate for your players. And I very much respect what Kieran is doing and saying. And I've heard he's departing the Women's League of Ireland, which I'm gutted about. I hope he stays there, or I hope at least he stays connected with it at some point. So on the other side, you know, like I've mentioned before, Eileen's come through our league. Like, she's been in the trenches for decades, and that's something you have to remember. And if someone said to me that I didn't care about the League of Ireland, after kind of, you feel like you've put in so many years of advocating, debating, and you've spent so much of your time just trying to support it and get more exposure. And I'd say for Eileen to hear someone presume that she doesn't have a deep care and empathy for the league that she came through, I would probably react the same, and I would be quite annoyed and defensive about it. So I can understand that, but like, that's not the issue here. Is the connection between our League of Ireland players and the national team, and at the moment one doesn't exist because our players are not training and playing at the same level that WSL players or English Championship players are playing at. And when you're coming into these games where you need players to be absolutely fully prepared, fit and sharp, it's just too risky. It's just not the right time to blood players. Obviously, there's a lot of talk about losing the home-based trainings. And honestly, like, I'm hearing talks about a 23 team. And like, Joe, you have to remember there's 15 years of this conversation. And you get to a point and you're just so fatigued by it. Like, and you get to a point, like I said, where when you're fatigued by something, you get quite negative about it. So I don't have a whole lot of good things to say right now. And sometimes when you don't have good things to say, you're better to stay quiet. But we can get into that at another point.
See, in the media, we love the bad stuff. Give us the bad stuff. No. We'll have a constructive conversation. But for the time being, great to have you on, and I hope things are going well in Colorado. Ruth, thanks a mil.
Yeah, thanks so much, Joe. Talk soon. Bye.
Now then, happy to say Miguel Delaney is with us. Miguel, you're very welcome.
Thank you.
So you're in Dublin next week, actually, to launch your new book, available, I'm sure, in all good bookstores, and Audible, Kindle.
Yeah.
Do you do the Audible version? Do I get your dulcet tones?
I did the intro and the outro. They did want me to do the whole thing. But obviously, like, just with the football schedule, that's almost impossible. And I was delighted with that, because when it came to doing the intro, it was fun for about 20 minutes, and then it became one of the most frustrating experiences I've ever had. Because it's essentially performing. So it was really difficult and really frustrating. So you suddenly can understand bandmates and things going nuts in studios, because I didn't get the line I wanted to write and was getting frustrated with myself, or I had an idea in my head about how I wanted to say something. Then you'd try and enunciate it and get a word wrong, because you'd get either the tone right and a word wrong, or the pronunciation right and get your tone wrong. And this happened in nearly every sentence.
Yeah. Remind us the name of the book for anyone who wants to do a quick little Google.
States of Play.
States of Play. Well, let's talk about it at some stage over the next couple of weeks when you're not so busy. That'd be great. So this Ballon d'Or business is so ridiculous, really. We were chatting about it briefly. Like, it's no wonder, actually, these footballers are all just so dysfunctional as people, because the level of pandering here from an entire organisation to Vinicius Jr. is just off the charts. And I can just imagine a grieved person reassuring fellow aggrieved person that this is a travesty and this is a disgrace and this great big echo chamber. And I was minded of Mendes in the Ronaldo documentary at every moment, just raising a toast to Ronaldo's sheer greatness, and rather than being embarrassed by the adulation, Ronaldo thinking this is appropriate behaviour. I truly am great, and it needs to be toasted at every turn. I mean, just the whole thing is a fiasco, no?
Yeah, and it is all the more incredible, actually. I suppose, with the long-running kind of tension of the fact it's an individual award in a collective sport, but that in a collective sport that at this point is more systemised than it's ever been in history. That's one issue. But then, of course, the bigger and funnier issue that I suppose is more relevant to your question is you have to pander to him, or you have to pander to any candidate, when in this Real Madrid dressing room, there is a lot of people who would be eyeing that sort of pandering and will be in future. It's amazing how it's gone at Real Madrid now, where after, I suppose, about half a decade, where they kind of, in a surprising show of humility, but I suppose they were forced financially, both through kind of the rise of state clubs and also the death they were in after COVID. They reassessed the reality of where they were, went in this policy of kind of signing young players. So most of the team that won the Champions League final in 2024 at Wembley against Dortmund, I think it was more than half of the team were signed as teenagers, or at least early 20s at the most, Vinicius being one of them. And now it's almost like they've come full circle after that, come out of that. They've signed Mbappe, who doesn't actually have an obvious place in the team, and he'll be looking at a Ballon d'Or in future. Bellingham is obviously, I suppose, people can see how outsized his personality has become. Trent Alexander-Arnold, they're looking at, given what he's talking about, winning a Ballon d'Or over major trophies. So it's back to classic Madrid, to the point where when one of their chosen figures, and I suppose this is the other thing with the Ballon d'Or, because it does feel like when a Madrid player has a chance of winning it, they go all in behind one of them, get like the full media machine, or the Madrid industrial complex really behind one of them. Because even if you notice the last few days, there wasn't that much talk of Dani Carvajal, even though he would have been quite high up in the voting. It was Vinicius, who everyone was behind. And this is probably something that's only going to accelerate in the future. And it has left them then suddenly, like, it's amazing, especially being someone who's half Spanish and watching it from the outside, watching it from London and kind of all of this. And like the number of people both in Spanish football and Spanish media that even said to me, it's incredible we have this situation where a Spanish player, for just the second time in history, has won the award. Like Xavi, Iniesta, Busquets, none of them did it. David Villa, now that was because it was the Messi-Ronaldo era. Rodri's done it. It should be cause for massive celebration. And yet, most of the Spanish-speaking media in the country are indignant because a Madrid player hasn't won it, because there's just this kind of heave behind it that speaks to us, to the power of Madrid and also how they view this.
Yes, like you could almost say, perhaps there's an acceptable level of ignorance in that Rodri is not a YouTube highlights player, and maybe they're watching Spanish football, and so they're not seeing much of him do his business. But of course, they would have seen the Euros. They would have seen the player of the tournament do his thing and his importance. So it's all the more bizarre. Luis Suarez in 1960, by the way, for anyone wondering, of Barcelona, the other. So just the second Spaniard. So yeah, a big deal. Was Rodri the deserving winner? Should Vinicius have won it? Whatever about the strop and the cancellation of the 50-party delegation being ridiculous. Did they have a case?
Yeah, I actually thought it was an interesting one in that I was looking even through the last 20 years of it. And it was a rare case where I think both 1 and 2 were worthy winners. I can't actually remember it being so split. Even in the Messi Ronaldo years, just looking through the voting and trying to recall like each of the individual seasons, it always felt like one considerably outdid the other. It was never a case where like it was neck and neck. Just I suppose just the nature of almost the classical dynamic. One was always ahead. Whereas at this, it was 2 very worthy claims. And also, I think what was kind of, I mean, if you're going back to, I suppose, maybe the more prestigious tradition of the award and what it was supposed to represent, away from the kind of the gaudiness of what it is now, it was I suppose 2 very different claims as close as they were. One, Vinicius, I think, was almost one of those vintage claims in terms of he was the decisive player in a lot of major matches, including the Champions League final, and that's something he has developed. He's a massive big game player. He can turn those matches in an instant, not just with the goals, but with that pace. I mean, City saw the effect of it in 2022 with that amazing goal that turned the tie in that semi-final. Sorry, the first leg of that semi-final where City went out and Madrid ended up winning it again. And of course, Vinicius scored the Champions League final winner that year as well. So it's that kind of big game scorer and a forward, obviously. And then in the other, it's kind of almost, I suppose it's a bit closer to what you would, maybe the traditional view of the award, where it's the dominant player or a player who defines a certain way of playing that's dominant. Because, I mean, really, when you look at City now, when you look at Spain in the summer now, I know Zubimendi came in the final and did a really good job. That's because Zubimendi himself is excellent. But it sometimes feels that you couldn't really play the Guardiola football or Spain's football, which is very linked to it, without Rodri. He's that important, or at least a midfielder like Rodri. And there are very few like him. I think that's probably why he won it in the end, really. Just because while the modern game and the way it's gone and the players it produces, there are a lot of wide forwards like Vinicius, and Madrid have about 3 of them. There are very, very few like Rodri. He's close to unique. And even like on Monday, when a lot of it was coming through, like, just speaking to people elsewhere in the Premier League, one of the lines that stood out for me was he's probably the most influential midfielder since Roy Keane, really, in the division. Just in terms of how, but in terms of play and even psychologically what he means to a team. So yeah, from that perspective, I think it was an interesting race this year, or at least it could have been, had it not been for all the messing afterwards, which kind of paints the award and also paints one of the clubs certainly as a bit of a farce.
Bit of a farce, yeah. To what extent do we think the Madrid unhappiness is driven by Vinicius? I'm told, and who knows, sometimes the reporting about these things can be slightly off, but I'm told he had a party ready to go and merchandise watches for invited guests to celebrate and all this kind of stuff. Is he, chief mourner here, or is there any part of him slightly embarrassed at the behaviour of his club?
I think it's more Perez and Madrid, and they're really playing on him. I mean, there's no getting away from it. It did mean a lot to him. But I think the issue was more, I think the specific problem with this is how much Madrid convinced themselves this was going to happen, essentially forgetting it's a public vote. I was hearing stories then on Sunday night, it was Sunday night when word started to get through to Vinicius' camp that Rodri, the people in the Spanish Federation were saying Rodri had won it, and Rodri himself was confident. And then I'm aware that people in Madrid started to look down the list of voters from last year, asking, who does this guy do? What does he do? Does he know football enough to be voting on this? So and it's amazing, really, that they Madrid have been acting as if they were entitled to this award, as if it was so beyond question that Vinicius deserved it. They haven't even considered the principle of the award, which is, again, just a simple vote. And yeah, you can take issue with the nature of it, who the voters are, whatever. It's 100 journalists from the top ranked countries in the game by FIFA ranking. But
there's a certain fairness to I think there's a critical mass where if you have the 100 journalists, one journalist per country of the top 100 FIFA ranked countries, and first gets 6 points, second gets 4 points, all the way down to fifth gets 1 point. They're asked to name their top 5 in descending order. Yeah, it's a decent sample size. I have to say, like, I'm in a minority of one here. I accept that, right? But I would not have Vinicius in my top 5. And just
really?
here, yeah, I really wouldn't. I think he's such an incomplete footballer without the football. And I find it increasingly bizarre the way at which we look at football as if it's only about what you do in possession. It really irks me. And obviously, look, Messi and Ronaldo, it's kind of hard to say they were workhorses. But what they did with the football was just so phenomenal, it kind of couldn't be ignored. But Vinicius is the 8th top scorer in La Liga. I mean, he scored 24 goals last season, 11 assists. It's not bad, but he played 40 games. It's not Ronaldo and Messi scoring 42 in 40 games. It's not that kind of inignorable. And to round off the point, I suppose what I'm getting at is, you watch Madrid against Dortmund the other night, and it's a carbon copy of the Champions League final in May, whereby his lack of application off the ball is shocking. And I mean shocking. And there are moments where teammates are saying, come on, in this instance, you have to at least press there if I'm doing all this. And he just doesn't. And in the Champions League final in May, Madrid's left-hand side was the source of all of Dortmund's joy, to the point where they got away with it until half-time. And then Ancelotti said, right, listen, Vinicius, we can't continue here. Jude Bellingham, you're going to go as my orthodox left winger, just hold the fort. And again, several months later against Dortmund the other week, it is shocking without the ball, and it's down Madrid's left-hand side where Dortmund make hay. And in modern-day football, any side worth their salt are going to take advantage of somebody's lack of application when it's to the extent of Vinicius. So he's actually, and so what happened there is Dortmund go 2-0 up and they sort of declare and say, we're Emre Can, you just try and look after things. We're going to go 5 at the back and we'll take off all our pacey players further up the pitch. And that, Vinicius in a game of like backs v forwards where Madrid are invited on, he's going to be phenomenal. Like he's a phenomenon with the ball. But I look at the game and I look at all the wonderful players in the world who are amazing with and without the ball. And I'm not saying this guy needs to be Rodri-esque without the ball, but he is an incredibly incomplete player. And what's worse is he's been indulged by a coach and he's been indulged by a club, and they're allowing him to do this. And Mo Salah doesn't love working back, Miguel, but he's doing it when he has to. He'll do it. And I think it's a failing of how we look at football that Vinicius is like, oh, what a player. Is he what a player? He's a great attacking player, but is he a good team player?
But I think the point you make there about indulgence is key to this, because I think he's a little bit of a product of a system. And I do, if Vinicius was under a systems coach that you're never really going to get at Madrid, although it'd be interesting as they do go for Alonso, what would happen there. I do think you'd see more of that in his game. Part of it is also kind of almost accommodate. I mean, and it's funny with Madrid now, we're almost going back 20 years now to the Mbappe thing is incredible, really, in terms of how there was no obvious place for him. And it feels like it does remind me of the summer of 2003 when they got rid of Miguel to bring in Beckham. And now suddenly they've messed with the formation, because I think that's where Vinicius worked previously. Yet Madrid have always been a little bit of a jigsaw, which is why Ancelotti worked so well there when, say, he didn't have anything like the same effect at Everton or Napoli. And it did look like his career was declining. It's just he fits this. And it's about kind of making it work within that system. It's why I think personally I'd cut Vinicius a little bit of slack on that, just because this is his role in that system. And also there's an element of keeping him fresh for these game-breaking moments. So I wouldn't go as far as you as saying he's incomplete. I think that's more just the role he's asked for in the squad. And I think it'd be interesting to see him in something else or in another side. And a lot of it is, of course, about keeping him for these moments, which I suppose, from that perspective, to be fair, you can't really deny. There is one point worth making, to be fair, on Messi, Ronaldo. I suppose this is where the actual voting or the Ballon d'Or every year can be, without all this nonsense, can at least be a bit more engaging because it's more open, and we can probably forget about their sort of levels, if you know what I mean. Where we mightn't get that for some time. Well, we might get the goals from Haaland, but I suppose there's a similar discussion there to be had with Vinicius in that he doesn't. There's really not much beyond the goals with Haaland or the occasional kind of the runs he makes to drag away defenders.
Yeah. And it's difficult to know how to weight the moments, where he did what he did to Dortmund the other week versus the moments I'm talking about. But
Madrid are a moments team.
They are.
Even now.
Yeah, it's true. But I guess this is the fun of football is to debate these things and have these opinions. So, I mean, Rodri all day long and twice on Sunday. I mean, it's not even a conversation for me. Give us a bit more on Mbappe then. Obviously, El Clasico was very chastening for all concerned. Is this thing going to work? Are they going to persevere with him through the middle? Obviously, you can't now say to Vinicius, listen, we were all behind you a week ago, but we're now moving you off the left-hand side for Mbappe. So assuming Vinicius stays there, then Mbappe has to stay through the middle. Is he going to make that work?
I think it could potentially evolve into one of the most interesting stories in football in the next year. Before, in the build-up to that Champions League final, where, it was back to Madrid being Madrid, I was talking to someone who works with the team, and they were basically a sentiment around was they've got the team quite finely tuned now, and there didn't seem an obvious place for Mbappe, but the line was, like I wrote this at the time, what the president wants, the president gets. And again, that's why I draw that parallel with Miguel and Beckham.
Yeah.
Claude Miguel just worked for Madrid. He made that Galactico team. He pinned it together. Then suddenly they lose that throw in Beckham, and of course the whole thing falls apart, which isn't actually the fault of Beckham. It's more what he was thrown into. And now you wonder whether it's just, it could end up a similar sort of thing because the attack just doesn't work the same way. They're much more of a moments team than they were even last season. But with the setup, not necessarily conducive to getting the best out of those players. Not even Mbappe himself. I just say he's not really used to playing in the centre. He wants to come in off the wing. That's where his pace is best at. Otherwise, as we saw so visibly the other night, otherwise that pace will just be misused because he'll be constantly offside because he hasn't had to tune his game in that sense. And I do wonder as well whether there's an element here of Mbappe is beginning to see the cost of spending so many years at Paris Saint-Germain where he didn't really have to think about any of this stuff. And now he's every week at a higher level. Whatever people think about whether the Spanish league has dropped off, it's a lot better than the French league. Madrid have more demands. They'll always have a kind of challengers in Barcelona, Atletico Madrid. So suddenly he can't be indulged in the same way and can't allow the same slackness.
Yeah.
And it's going to be very interesting to see what happens there. As well as that, suddenly, a dressing room with a lot of egos in it.
Yeah. I mean, you'd love to be a fly in the wall. What was the great Zidane line? We have a Ferrari, we just sold the engine. Yeah. He wasn't wrong. Before you go, Ruben Amorim looking at fairly nailed on at this stage. There's a 30-day notice period being talked about. I presume another few zeros to sort that out, and they'll get past that.
Yeah. So that just the last thing I reported there before it came on air. So by the time it's out, this might be resolved. I suspect it will. But Sporting want €5 million for him to start immediately, which is fair enough. Sporting are apparently a little bit irritated that this has happened mid-season because they expected him to stay till the end because they haven't retained the title in 70 years, which is actually interesting from the perspective as well of how he can make the step up to Manchester United, because a lot of people have been keen to point out the parallels with Ten Hag. Managers have done well in a second-tier league and now have to make the step up to the biggest league in the world and probably the biggest club within that league with all the recent historic weight on it. I do think there are differences, though. I think the Portuguese league is more respected than the Dutch league, which is almost seen as a bit of a development league. As well as that, Ajax were dominant for a decade in the structure that works that Ten Hag fit into. And Sporting, as big a club as they are in Portugal, they're nowhere near the size of Porto and Benfica, as illustrated by that stat about not winning it or not retaining the title in 70 years. And also, I suppose this is important, and this is where I think this move has been interesting. Amorim had much more interest from other big clubs than Ten Hag did. I mean, it shouldn't be forgotten. Spurs passed on Ten Hag because they didn't think he had the requisite charisma, something we've probably seen evidence of over the past few months. Whereas Amorim was genuinely close to Liverpool until they felt Slot fitted their preference more. City, obviously, the thought has been they've been considering him, although it was conspicuous how keen people within City were to say, oh, actually, we weren't thinking about him. Bayern and Barcelona have had a look at him. So I think there are the suggestions. There's more there, and I think that's why, given that this entire situation, going back till really right into last season, where it looked chaos from Ineos, and particularly, chaos from United, and particularly the new Ineos leadership, that they were allowing this perception of indecision that was just kind of paralysing the club, really, to suddenly go from that to quite swiftly lining up one of a coach considered one of the brightest prospects in management is actually, I suppose it's big club behaviour of the sort we haven't really seen for United for some time. So
on balance, you think a good appointment?
Yeah, I have to say, I mean, when Ten Hag went on Monday morning, I was immediately thinking, given that Tuchel had gone and did seem fine for a short-term thing for United like that, there was very few options out there. But Amorim is one. Amorim is one they consider. So yeah, I mean, it's no guarantee. It doesn't mean he will end up being the saviour. No. Well, it's probably about as good as United could have done in this context.
So if you take it, just at the top of the podcast before you came, the very charitable version of events you could give towards Ineos now is that they fudged the Ten Hag decision over the summer, but it was understandable. It's difficult when he's just won the FA Cup in that fashion, and several of the hierarchy are just in the door, really. So, they fudged it, yes, and it was expensive because they gave him transfer kitty for the summer. So not great, but understandable perhaps. But now that they've got to a point where intervention was required, they've done it speedily in getting rid of Ten Hag and not waiting another 2-3 months. And they seem to have sorted out this Amorim appointment behind the scenes, quietly, quickly. It's done. It's not a saga for several weeks. He'll presumably be in at some stage in the next week or so. See, you kind of say, okay, that's reasonably impressive. That's grown-up stuff.
Yeah, I think it's more they'll get away with it by eventually acting more like grown-ups. Because I mean, the summer is still baffling. I suppose it is more understandable in that Barada and Ashworth weren't in their roles yet.
Yeah.
And they have driven this. So, okay, fair enough from that perspective. But the one thing I would say there as well is the decision they took with Ten Hag in the summer actually goes against, because it's the opposite of all this high performance stance that we're supposed to believe they take. I mean, and even the fact they were swayed by the FA Cup final actually illustrates that.
Yeah.
Because they're supposed to be taking all the emotion out of it, and all the evidence from the previous season, and not just the previous season, actually going back to really, I would say, the 7-0 against Liverpool, which probably did change something in Ten Hag's tenure. All the evidence suggested this wasn't going to fix itself, and rather than assessing that in the thorough way that Ratcliffe wanted them to in this notorious meeting they had in October that went on for 7 hours. Now, to be fair, at that meeting they ultimately all decided that Ten Hag had to go. There was debate over who next at that point. But to not go with the evidence in June and actually stick with him, and not only that, I mean, I did think they should have changed Ten Hag, but it's impossible to have some sympathy for him in the sense that they interviewed him for his own job, looked at other candidates, and then brought him back. And once you do that, he basically had no chance this season. The season had to go perfectly to wave away the many questions that came from that situation. His authority was immediately undermined. And it just remains a remarkable decision they did it.
Yeah.
But now that they might get away with it. And who knows, I suppose it's the happenstance of these sort of things. And how football, for all well-run clubs, try to plan on that, there is still an element of kind of human fortune involved. Now, if they get away with it with Amorim, who's available now, then it might just work out.
Yeah. I did say it was a charitable version of events.
Yeah.
We're out of time. Thank you so much. Great to have you on. Enjoy Dublin next week for the book launch, and we'll talk in due course. Miguel, thanks a mil.
Cheers, Joe.
There you go, Miguel Delaney, and before that, Ruth Fahy on the podcast today. That's pretty much us done for this Wednesday offering. Paul McGinley is in your feed and well worth the listen. Tomorrow we're going to talk rugby. There's a lot to talk about. Obviously, Munster fans will be going deep on just what's gone on around Munster way. And there'll be a little bits and bobs offering as well. And then on Friday, Richie Hogan is going to come into studio to talk about his new book, which I'm reading at the moment. And it's very interesting. So one of the great Kilkenny hurlers and beyond, Richie Hogan, is with us on Friday. So that is the plan. We'll catch you tomorrow. Bye.